Grand Rising, Grand Rising. Hope everyone's doing well.
Grand Rising, Grand Rising.
Do us a favor and throw up some of those ones so we can make sure that you can hear our mics and that the music is not too loud or either too low in the background. Grand Rising, LJ.
Mike.
Go ahead, Bones.
I was just giving them a mic check to make sure everything was coming through clear.
And I'm just stepping all on you. My bad. Grand Rising, Fun Cousins. Grand Rising, McDonald 1. Grand Rising, LJ Free. Grand Rising, Golden Moon. What else we got out there? Grand Rising, You Don't Want It. Hopefully everyone's having a great rising thus far. So how are you doing there, Sir Bones?
No complaints.
Okay.
Actually feeling well rested.
That's really good, especially for you, Mr. I don't get much sleep. Grand Rising, Arthur Gray. Almost got tongue tied real quick. Hopefully everyone has their hard hats on and they're ready to get this work in as we learn and grow together. Macadam one says I'll be in and out on the plantation, bro. I understand that. You gotta do what you gotta do for your family. Ain't nothing wrong with that. We appreciate you for listening. So before we get started, of course, we always want to make sure those that are tuned in for the first time know who we are at the Thomas Assembly. My name is TMH, or Thomas Jefferson. I'm just one of many whose voices you will hear, who's actually doing work in the backgrounds with the Thomas Assembly. And there's also Bones H. McCoy, the founder of the Thomas Assembly. And then you'll be hearing from No Sellout in the next few minutes. Then we have special guests like James Doodle Vision. There are a lot of other individuals in the background doing the work that you'll start to get to be familiar with them, and sometimes they'll be on as guests and providing their input and their background and their information expertise. So, Thomas Assembly, who are we? It's the gathering of minds that do the work. And our mission is to provide education, culture, and social services that reconnect indigenous Americans back to their tribe. We are a Thomas Assembly, a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising up indigenous Americans' voices by using genealogy, also known as family history or your family tree, which is the study of families and the tracing of their lineage and history. Genealogists use oral interviews, historical records, genetic analysis, and other records to obtain information about a family and to demonstrate kinship and pedigrees of its members. So we don't do or advocate DNA tests. Not for genealogy anyway. Our core values are the foundation of our company, essential to our success, and serves as a lens through which we evaluate every business decision. And those core values include, but not limited to, integrity, knowing and doing what is right, respect, treating others the way we want to be treated, responsibility, embracing opportunities to contribute, and servant leadership, serving the common good. And as we always like to remind you, our goal is to help those individuals who have heard or know that they are Indians and want to do their genealogy and try to find those Indians in their family they could trace back to eventually get back to their tribe, and also continue to help their community, and also help their community themselves, and if they so choose, their tribe, to be self-sufficient. Bones, did I leave anything out, bro? Grand Rising, Pamela Hall. Hope you're doing well, sis. We'll be starting and reading the section about the Georgia Indian War of 1782, which is basically nothing more than a conflict of the Cherokee Wars, which is nothing more than a ongoing or continuing battle of the Indian Wars, which to this day has not ceased. Grand Rising, Alpha Jones, Prince William County representing. Grand Rising, I am Flying Squirrel. Everybody's starting to pour in now. Good stuff. Good to see y'all up in here. We haven't started yet. Just did the, I guess for lack of better terms, the public service announcement. So I'll be putting the link to the Georgia Indian War in the chat soon. Pamela says I'm good. Had to run and catch the cab. Ooh, I'm tired. Well, you gotta wait for it to come to a stop first. It's not a good idea just to be just running after it. It can be dangerous. But we appreciate you. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and put the link to where we're at in the chat. Again, we will be starting the paragraph that reads Georgia Indian War of 1782. Well, thank you for coming in and just allowing us to expose you to this information. To be honest with you, we're learning this together. So I'm just trying to make sure we do a good job. Grand Rising, no sellout. Give everybody a mic check. Make sure they can hear you.
Mic check, peace.
Now you coming in low, bro.
We got to turn you up on the left. You low on the left.
Grand Rising of Darian Woods. Give us a mic check. No sellout.
So you need another one? Mic check.
Alright.
2, 2, 1.
Alright, cool. Alright. So I've already put the link in the back in the chat. Keep saying back chat in the chat. Hopefully everyone's able to take a look at it at their leisure. Follow along with us. And the goal again is to make sure that we provide you with information so you can do your own research, correct any mistakes that we have made, provide any additional information that we may have overlooked. If it touches on a tribe that you are a part of or doing some studying on, please provide that additional information so that we may add to it. And as always, any information that we put in, especially from Wikipedia, the sources to that information will always and should always be at the bottom. Grand Rising Copper Color Queen. So we will go ahead and get started. Starting on the Georgia Indian War of 1782. And the first paragraph reads, at the end of 1781, the Cherokee invaded Georgia once again with a group of Muskogee, this time being met by South Carolina and Georgia troops under Andrew Pickens and Elijah Clark at the Oconee River after much back-country raiding. Evading the American force, the Cherokee withdrew, adopting a scorched earth strategy to deny their foes supplies. The force eventually retreated, opening the backcountry to further raids. A scorched earth tactic. They must have been setting everything afire. Interesting. By the fall of 1782, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Waters of the Loyalist Rangers, formerly stationed at Fort 96 in South Carolina, had retreated to the frontier of Cherokee-Muskogee territory just outside Georgia. From his base at the mouth of Long Swamp Creek on Eddy River, he and his remaining rangers, in conjunction with Cherokee and Muskogee warriors, ravaged backwoods, homesteads, and settlements. Like we've always stated, they're not really fighting or appear to be fighting face to face. It's more like skirmishes. You raid my territory, I raid your territory, you raid my territory. And then if we so happen to meet each other in the process of raiding each other's territories, we're going to either have hand-to-hand combat, there's going to be an ambush, or something like that. That just seems to be what's happening. I could be wrong. I don't know. So I switched screens and I threw myself off, and now I'm trying to get back to where I was. Give me a moment. I found it. So the third paragraph in the Georgia Indian Wars paragraph, it reads, the states of South Carolina and Georgia sent out a joint expedition led by Andrew Pickens and Elijah Clark to put an end to his insurgency. Leaving September 16th, they invaded the section of the country ranging at least as far as Ustanley, where they took prisoners. In all, they destroyed 13 towns and villages by October 22nd. Waters and his men had escaped, and the Cherokee sued for peace. What? They sued for peace? Really? And it's interesting that it reads that Andrew Pickens, Elijah Clark, and their accomplices took prisoners, aka prisoners of war, sometimes noted as slaves. So I take it these prisoners of war were either Indians or adopted individuals living on the reservations or the towns that they were raiding. And then it says the Cherokee sued for peace. I didn't know that was possible. Am I missing something? I don't know.
That's a new one to me. Suing for peace.
So who do you actually classify your suit with? The state? Federal government? Very interesting. Exactly what Darian Woods. That's the same question I was asking for you. Who are you appealing to sue? Especially when you're doing raids just like they're raiding. And this is supposed to be wartime, right?
Unless you're suing for the peace action.
Or it's not a war. It's just labeled as a war after the fact. I mean, that's possible, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Some of them wars look like labor strikes after you go through the history of them.
Ladarian Wood said there wasn't no UN back then. That was a good one. I don't know. Maybe this next paragraph will be able to shed some more light on this, because this is interesting. Suing for peace. I'll put a footnote on that. So, which leads us to the next paragraph called the St. Augustine Conference, which is midway through. If you have a laptop or a Chromebook or a tablet, it should be midway through this Cherokee American Wars. It says, in January 1783, Dragon Canoe and 1,200 Cherokee traveled to St. Augustine, which then was the capital of East Florida, for a summit meeting with a delegation of Western tribes. Now, these Western tribes consisted of Shawnee, Muskogee, Mohawk, Seneca, Lenape, Mingo, Tuscarora, and Choctaw. And they called for a federation of Indians to oppose the Americans and their frontier colonists. And then you have Brown, the British Indian superintendent, approved the concept. So you have Dragon Canoe and the Cherokee, which what they were calling at that time the Chickamauga Cherokee, and a delegation of Western tribes. To note, were actually some of the Haudenosaunee through the Mohawk and the Lenape and Tuscarora came together under this confederation, and it was approved by British Indian Superintendent Brown. Now, they don't give his first name. Grand Rising, Enrique. Hope everything's fine. So they don't give a name other than just Brown. So I take it that Brown only had a last name. Grand Rising, Trav Bath. Good to see you, bro.
Peace, everyone coming in the chat. Peace, Isaac.
So there are skirmishes going back and forth during this Georgia War of 1782. Andrew Pickens and Elijah Clark of the American forces are basically scorching the earth and doing these insurgencies and tactics through the backwoods or the back entrances to the Chickamauga territory. And then the the Cherokee, they sue for peace. And this happens at the St. Augustine Conference, where you have these tribes under Confederacy get together, and it's approved by the British Indian Superintendent, aka agent. So now this time frame, they're calling them superintendents, and they're no longer calling them Indian agents. And we know what the purpose of the Indian agents were, right? Kill the Indian, save the man. So let's continue. At Tuckabashie, a few months later, a general council of the major southern tribes, Cherokee, Muskogee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole, plus representatives of smaller groups, Mobile, Catawba, Biloxi, Puyallup, etc., took place to follow up. But plans for the Federation were cut short by the signing of the Treaty of Paris. The signing of May 30th, 1783, the treaty confirmed the northern boundary between the state of Georgia and the Cherokee, with the Cherokee ceding large amounts of land between the Savannah and the Chattahoochee River. Uh-oh. So this St. Augustine Conference and this summit never took place because of the Treaty of Paris. All right, let's go get these hard hats on, ladies and gentlemen. Pull out your pickaxes. We're going in. Because I know I need a refresher of what was actually given up under the Treaty of Paris. Who benefited from it, meaning not just the superintendents on either side, but the actual chief. Grand Rising Antonio. Antonio says St. Augustine. Oh, he's not important to the church. Be funny. So I put the link to the Treaty of Paris, 1783, in the chat. The Treaty of Paris, signed in Paris by representatives of King George III of Great Britain and representatives of the United States of America on September 3rd, 1783, ended the American Revolutionary War. Stop. So, the Treaty of Paris was signed in Paris by representatives of the King, who's then George III of Great Britain, and representatives of the United States of America. This happened on September 3rd, 1783, and ended the American Revolutionary War. And it basically established Georgia, or there was some Georgia land that once belonged to the Cherokee Indians that now became part of the United States. Let's check up. My question is, if it was an American Revolutionary War, why would they go all the way over to Paris to sign the treaty? Wouldn't it make sense to sign a treaty where the battle was fought?
Makes sense to me.
Or maybe that battle was just not fought on U.S. soil. Trabab says, I visited and I got some pictures of St. Augustine Fort in Florida. The whole town is a tourist attraction. Yeah, of course it is now. Trabab, hopefully one day you'll be able to share some pictures, and we would love to do a community spotlight on you and what you're doing in the community as far as what's going on in Florida and all the work you and your company do. So, Treaty of Paris ended the Revolutionary War. The treaty was signed in Paris, not where the actual fighting was supposed to have taken place. Here's my question. Were the tribes aware that the Revolutionary War ended before they decided to sue the state of Georgia for what Andrew Pickens and Mr. Clark were doing? Ladarian Woods, see, now you're asking the great questions, Ladarian. Ladarian says, not only that, who was the U.S. representatives? Free ads. Does it make love to... Go ahead, boy. Go ahead, boss. Go ahead, boss.
Yeah, I was saying that when you think about it, they haven't had all the states and territories. So who was representing the state?
That's interesting. Free says, does...
Remember, they getting into Georgia. They don't
what?
They don't get actually the land of Georgia until the 1800s.
And right, we're still in 1783.
Exactly. See, they keep saying Georgia. No, they just got a piece of the coast. or Savannah. You understand? The part of what you know of Georgia right now, they don't get to these parts until what, 1804, 1805?
Exactly. And LJ Free says, does it make military sense to leave the place of battle to travel overseas to sign a document? No, it does not, because that's dividing your resources. And again, as we know, wars are fought by proxy. So I am under the assertion that these representatives were either already over there or they only sent a few representatives. Antonio says, start from the beginning, TMH. Layman's terms. But Darren Wood said, that's what I was getting at. If they don't have it locked down, who's speaking for the people again? Again, what we're starting to discover is that timelines are not matching up. We're starting to ask questions. Pamela Hall says it must have been because all of the countries that were fighting and claiming land. Could that be why they took it to Paris? We don't know. I'm sure we will find out as we continue asking, but these are some great questions. Antonio says unless the representatives were already in Paris. Go ahead, Bounce.
Who recognized the Americans as a sovereign nation first?
France.
Who supported them? And who had one of the longest standing relationships with the Indians in the Northeast area again?
France. And
so at this time, see, this is where they confuse the lines. At this time, France has ownership of a lot.
You're breaking up,
with France to be able to do anything at the time.
At
this time, France has ownership of a lot. It's still breaking.
You're a little better. Go ahead.
And France has a lot of control over the land at this time over here. So it would make sense. That's who you would have to deal with. Remember, the English colonies only had 13, and Georgia is the 13th. And they didn't get that until, like we said, the top of the 1800s. They were still fighting again in Florida, what, 1815, 1816? Something wrong here.
So that means you had the mulatto mixed chiefs going to France to sign these treaties, getting their deals cut, getting their land, turning their tribal members into slaves because now they're working on the same land that they once were working on anyway, and the narrative and paper genocide is starting to take full effect. Antonio puts, but what I missed was the event in regards to St. Augustine. You said that event couldn't take place because of this treaty taking place. Oh, Antonio, there were basically skirmishes back and forth between Dragon Canoe and his Indians, and there were troops under Andrew Pickens leading raids and attacks on Dragon Canoe's territory and basically burning their supplies and things of that nature. And apparently, Andrew Pickens under the United States forces were doing such a great job and causing such mass destruction that Dragon Canoe and the Cherokee sued Andrew Pickens in the United States for peace. But before that lawsuit could take effect and they had their assembly, all that was put to a halt because of the Treaty of Paris. So that's what I was talking about. So thank you for having me recap that so everybody who missed it would understand. So thanks. So now we know who the players are. You have France, which is where the treaty is being signed. You have a lot of the Haudenosaunee tribes who were fighting on behalf of the colonies, now the United States. And also some of those tribes in the South, Muskogee, Shawnee, And some of the Cherokee fighting on behalf of the United States. I'm sure their representatives and chiefs went over there as well. And that's where they got their land, the documentation and that paperwork. And then they came back and probably distributed the land. Antonio says, so in other words, Americans claimed their victory and went to the supplier and made a deal to be the new distributor. Antonio, I could not have put it better myself. That is phenomenal. Matter of fact, I'm going to read it again. Antonio reads, so in other words, the Americans claimed their victory, went to the supplier, France, because they had control of the land at that particular time, and made a deal to be the new distributor. He says, if this was power. So let's continue reading about the Treaty of Paris.
So before you go further,
Go
let's
ahead.
not forget that the Iroquois been working with the French for years in the fur trade before all this go down.
That's correct. And the Iroquois is a French term. They call themselves a Haudenosaunee, which basically means those who dwell on a longhouse. So, the Treaty of Paris was signed in Paris, France by representatives of King George III of Great Britain and representatives of the United States of America on September 3rd, 1783. It ended the American Revolutionary War. The treaty set the boundaries between the British Empire in North America and the United States on lines exceedingly generous to the latter. Details included fishing rights and restorations of property and prisoners of war. This treaty and the separate peace treaties between Great Britain and the nations that supported the American cause, France, Spain, and the Dutch Republic, are known collectively as the Peace of Paris. Only Article 1 of the treaty, which acknowledges the United States' existence as free and sovereign and independent states, remains in force. Yeah, I have to remember that, Antonio, to use layman terms. So what we're seeing here is that the American Revolutionary War has ended, and boundaries have been set between the British Empire and North America. So what I always understood that happened after the American Revolutionary War was that the Brits went home. That's what I thought. So I didn't ask enough questions of my teacher. I assumed the British got their butt kicked. They left the United States altogether and went back home with their tail tucked between their legs. However, that's not what this treaty reads. It basically tells us that, and the lines which were divided the borders or the boundaries between the British Empire in North America were exceedingly generous. Yes, Antonio, a deal was made. So you figure this time, so North America, the French had a lot of the territory of North America locked down for a while before Great Britain even got to the States. But now there has been a deal to where Great Britain is now owning property that was once owned by France. And there is a specific dividing line between North America, i.e. Canada, and the United States of America, the 13 colonies. So any allegiance with France that the Haudenosaunee, aka Iroquois, would have had has now changed, because now a lot of that property now belongs to Great Britain, who lost the war, which makes no sense because France helped the United States and they won the war. So wouldn't it make more sense for France to keep that property and Great Britain to go back to Great Britain? I'm just saying. Free says if that was the case, we wouldn't be paying tribute to Great Britain still to this day. We didn't leave empty-handed. they didn't leave empty-handed. Antonio says, my ultimate question, who were the French working on behalf of, and who was Great Britain working on behalf of? He says the church and the state worked in unison. Antonio, it looks like, and it appears to me, and anybody that has any insight on this, they were basically playing a game of Monopoly on this land. And they were using our ancestors, the Indians, as pieces or proxies to get things done. That's why 1 minute the land is owned by the United States or Europeans or France or the Dutch Republic. Then the next minute it's owned by somebody else. Meanwhile, the chiefs and the tribes find out later, unless you're a principal chief, then you probably knew all along, because not only are the principal chiefs of these tribes doing deals with France exclusively, but they're also doing backdoor deals with Great Britain and the colonies, now the United States, after the Revolutionary War. He says, Antonio, I dare say Spain. They are the silent partner that has been dimmed down in history, but they're behind a lot throughout the entire timeline. Yeah, because at one particular time, remember when we was going over the viceroyalty of Spain, Spain dominated in territorial oversight. Trabab, great question. Trabab asks, who translated between the three? Well, each state had their own interpreters. And then you had a lot of the superintendents of the tribes that spoke many languages. Grand Rising David Corey. Darian Wood says, a big game. And yeah, we were the dog, the car, the hat. They ran off with it. You're right, LaDarian. We were all of our pieces on the Monopoly board. And to this day, we still are. So our job is to stop being the pieces and get to the board and start playing, so we can get a piece of this Monopoly pie. So it says, details included fishing rights and restoration of property and prisoners of war. Hold on. All right. Grand Rising Oak Cliff Tiff. Good to see you. It says this treaty and the separate peace treaties between Great Britain and nations that supported the American cause, France, Spain, and the Dutch Republic, are known collectively as a Peace of Paris. And only Article 1 of the treaty, which acknowledges the United States' existence as free and sovereign and independent states, remains in force. So that means everything else is no longer null and void. So let's look at the agreement, shall we? Because this is the most important part, isn't it? Peace negotiations began in... Say again, Bones.
You got that right.
Peace negotiations began in Paris in April 1782 and continued through the summer. Representing the United States were Benjamin Franklin, who had been there, John Jay, Henry Lawrence, John Adams, David Hartley, and Richard Oswald. It says Richard Harwell. It says David Hartley, and Richard Oswald represented Great Britain.
Listen to them last names, though.
Franklin, Lawrence, Adams, Hartley, Oswald. And then Great Britain was represented by Hartley and Oswald. Interesting. So why do you say listen to those last names, Bones?
Adam, Oswald. Them last names are responsible for some things in history.
True.
War of the Worlds, Oswald.
That would be true, sir. It said the treaty was drafted November 30th, 1782 and signed at the Hotel de New York at present 56 Rue Jacob. And this was done in Paris on September 3rd, 1783 by Adams, Franklin, Jay, and Hartley. Regarding the American treaty, the key episodes came in September 1782 when French Foreign Minister Vergennes proposed a solution that was strongly opposed by his ally, the United States. France was exhausted by the war, and everyone wanted peace except for Spain. Go figure. Which insisted on continuing the war until it could capture Gibraltar from the British. Vergennes came up with the deal that Spain would accept instead of Gibraltar. Vergennes came up with the deal that Spain would accept instead of Gibraltar, period. The United States would gain its independence, but be confined to the area east of the Appalachian Mountains. Britain would take the area north of the Ohio River. And the area south of that would be set up an independent Indian barrier state under Spanish control. Hold on. Did y'all just hear that? Did anybody learn this in school? Because I know I didn't. So it says the United States would gain its independence, but be confined to the areas east of the Appalachian Mountains, meaning they couldn't go past the Appalachian Mountains, basically the coast leading down to Georgia, meaning they still hadn't had control over Florida. As a matter of fact, as Bones says, and as history dictates and indicates, depending on how you feel about history, they were still warring in Georgia, so they only had a piece of Georgia. And Britain would take the area north of the Ohio River. In the area south of what would be set up as an independent Indian barrier state under Spanish control. And this is what James Dudovision was talking about when he was saying that Alexander Hamilton was going to use the Catawba Sapani, aka Isa, as the navy because Spain was going to make him, Alexander Hamilton, the viceroyalty of that Indian barrier state or territory. So it was going to be separate from the United States. So Britain didn't leave as was assuaged by history. Grand Rising, Tego. So during the victory, supposedly, of the Revolutionary War, Spain, Great Britain, and the United States are still at play in North America, i.e. Canada, and Middle America, which is the United States. It says, however, the Americans realized that they could get a better deal directly from London. Backdoor deals again. John Jay promptly told the British that he was willing to negotiate directly with them, cutting off Spain, France, and Spain. Wait a minute. They some dirty dogs, man. It says, however, the Americans realized that they could get a better deal directly from London. John Jay promptly told the British that he was willing to negotiate directly with them, cutting off France and Spain. Now, do y'all remember that France and Spain were the two main countries that helped the United States defeat somewhat the British. So now they're talking about cutting out France and Spain, the main countries that helped you. Not only that, but if it wasn't for France acknowledging you as a sovereign territory, United States, you wouldn't be able to gain sovereignty. Go to Moon says, did they not destroy the capital in the 1800s? That's true, Go to Moon. Darian Wood says, sounds like a bunch of beatdowns and paper victories. I agree. So the United States is cutting backdoor deals with the people that they were supposed to, use in air quotes, beat in the Revolutionary War with the help of the individuals they about to cut out, France and Spain. The British Prime Minister Lord Shelburne agreed. He was in charge of the British negotiations, some of which took place in his study at Lansdowne House, now a bar in the Lansdowne Club. And he now saw a chance to split the United States away from France and make the new country a valuable economic partner. The Western terms were that the United States would gain all of the area east of the Mississippi River, north of Florida, and south of Canada. The northern boundary would be almost the same as today. The United States would gain fishing rights of Canadian coast and agreed to allow British merchants and loyalists to try to recover their property. It was a highly favorable treaty for the United States, and deliberately so from the British point of view. Prime Minister Shelburne foresaw highly profitable two-way trade between Britain and the rapidly growing United States, as indeed came to pass. Free says, we had no real allies back then or now. We only had each other like we do now. Free, and it also seems like even the United States were originally the England colonies. They're looking at it that same way too. So you're dealing with four entities that are trying to work amicably on one continent. And for you know the definition of that, right? I think it's called family. Great Britain also signed separate agreements with France and Spain, and provisionally with the Netherlands. In the treaty with Spain, the territories of East and West Florida were ceded to Spain. And this was done without a clear northern boundary, resulting in a territorial dispute resolved by the Treaty of Madrid in 1795. Antonio says, what's interesting is Britain's relationship with the Catholic Church was volatile. Excuse me. Antonio says that what's interesting is Britain's relationship with the Catholic Church was volatile. France and Spain, on the other hand, amen. It's really interesting how this is playing out. So Great Britain signed separate agreements with France and Spain and provisionally with the Netherlands. In the treaty with Spain, the territories of East and West Florida were ceded to Spain. So Spain is thinking they have territory further north than they actually have. And it says without a clear northern boundary, resulting in a territorial dispute resolved by the Treaty of Madrid in 1795. Spain also received the island of Menorca, the Bahama Islands, Grenada, and Montserrat, captured by the French and Spanish, and were returned to Britain. Antonio says the question really is who was representing America during this treaty? Benjamin Franklin, John J. Henry Lawrence, and John Adams. That's who they say was representing the United States. But you got to remember, Benjamin Franklin spent over 20 years in France, being the diplomat for the United States. That's why when individuals start talking about sovereignty, and you don't have any diplomats in other countries, how are you going to be sovereign and you don't have any representative anywhere else where you can have a diplomatic relationship? But I'll leave that alone. Reed says, where is the Catholic Church based out of? How close is Spain and Italy in diplomatic relationships? Relations? That's a good question, Free. It says the treaty with France was mostly about exchanges of captured territory. So I took your land, you took my land, so we're going to swap it. France's only net gains were the island of Tobago and Senegal in Africa. Now wait a minute. How is it that all this happened during the Revolutionary War? When was France and Spain fighting over Tobago and Senegal in Africa? What's that got to do with the Revolutionary War? Huh? It said France's only net gains were the island of Tobago and Senegal in Africa, but also reinforced earlier treaties guaranteeing fishing rights of Newfoundland. Dutch possessions in the East Indies, captured in 1781, were returned by Great Britain to the Netherlands in exchange for trading privileges in the Dutch East Indies by the treaty, which was not finalized until 1784. Okay, so the Revolutionary War, which we were taught, again, I don't know, my school may have been different, but I was taught it was fought for the 13 colonies to be independent from Great Britain and have the right to expand west of the Mississippi. But I'm finding that is not the case based off of this treaty. It reads, the United States Congress of the Confederation ratified the Treaty of Paris on January 14, 1784. Copies were sent back to Europe for ratification by the other parties involved. The first reaching France in March 1784. British ratification occurred on April 9, 1784, and the ratification version were exchanged in Paris on May 12, 1784. Cliff Tiff says that's her born day. Man, I know this is going to get deep, but this is ridiculous. So here are some of the treaty key points. This treaty and the separate peace treaties between Great Britain and the nations that supported the American cause, France, Spain, and the Dutch Republic, are known collectively as the Peace of Paris. Only Article 1 of the treaty, which acknowledges the United States' existence as free, sovereign, and independent states, remains in force. The borders of the U.S. changed in later years, which is a major reason for specific articles of the treaty to be superseded. Pamela Hall says, none of this is making sense to me. Too many overlapping. How did they fight a war in two different places, sign treaties, and still land all at the same time? Pamela Hall, they were using us as their soldiers. It's no different than if we send troops over into Afghanistan and you have a core group of soldiers that are teaching the people there to fight and use our tactics. We stay there for a time and then we pull out. And they're still over there fighting up under the U.S. flag on U.S. bases. So hopefully that helps. The preamble declares the treaty to be in the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity. Well, there goes the church. Followed by a reference to the divine providence. And it states the bona fides of signatories and declares the intention of both parties to forget all past misunderstandings and differences and secure to both perpetual peace and harmony. So forget all the backstabbing. Let's forget how we double cross each other. We're going to sign this sheet of paper and then all will be forgiven. So we gonna forgive and forget. Okay. Britain acknowledged the United States. New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, Providence Plantations, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So at this particular time, before the 1800s, the United States was only from New Hampshire to Georgia. And they acknowledged it to be free, sovereign, and independent states, and that the British Crown and all heirs and successors relinquished claims to the government, property, and territorial rights of the same and every part thereof. So in retrospect, if you look in, as we talk to some of the people from London and Great Britain, a lot of them that know this history have a disdain for how we did business. And I can understand it now looking at this treaty. We were only supposed to have control. They were only supposed to have control of just those 13 colonies. But as you'll see, the United States ended up doing more backdoor deals to end up getting Great Britain, Spain, and France off the West Coast, the Midwest and the West Coast. Number 2, establishing the boundaries of the United States include, but not limited to, those between the United States and British North America, from the Mississippi River to the southern colonies. Britain surrenders their previously owned land. Number 3, granting fishing rights to United States fishermen in the Grand Banks, off the coast of Newfoundland and the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Recognizing the lawful contract debts to be paid to creditors on either side. Number 4 is important. This is something that is often forgotten, which is the driving force of why the United States did what they did. Recognizing the lawful contracted debts to be paid to creditors on either side. Who did the United States owe money to? France and Spain, right? And also they owe money to the India, and also to Great Britain. So that debt still had to be paid. So you are a newly structured company, and you have 13 colonies, but you have a lot of debt, and you are not pulling in enough taxes to pay that debt. So what do? Keep reading. Number 5, the Congress of the Confederation will earnestly recommend to state legislatures to recognize the rightful owners of all confiscated lands and provide for the restitution of all estates, rights, and properties which have been confiscated belonging to British subjects, the Loyalists. Number 6, the United States will prevent future confiscations of the property of Loyalists, which they did not do. Number 7, prisoners of war on both sides are to be released. All property of British Army, including slaves, y'all catch that right, including slaves, meaning captured Indians, because we still have not heard or seen anything about any Africans now in the United States, is to remain and to be fortified. Number 7, Great Britain and the United States are each to be given perpetual access to the Mississippi River. Remember, the Mississippi ran all throughout that continent, and it was the best way to travel. So now you can see why Great Britain had no problem with allowing the United States to control the East Coast up into the Appalachian Mountains, because they still had access to the West. Territories captured by either side subsequent to the treaty will be returned without compensation. So the land that you captured on my end and the land that I captured on your end will go back. So there's not going to be any compensation needed. Tanko says, I thought slaves were here since the 1600s. Well, yeah, they were. Majority of them were us, Indians. Oh, African slaves. I'm sure there was some sprinkle here and there and throughout. But how can you have slaves and there be slave trading when France, Britain, United States, and Indians are all at war? Well, you got time to buy and sell slaves when you always fight. If you worried about your house getting raided, you're going to go to the store to buy some slaves and bring them back and gotta feed them. Okay, so what happens if you leave, you come back, and your house burned down? What do you do with the slaves you gotta feed? It's just a question. Because there's more than enough evidence to support that villages were being raided, lands were being scorched. Remember, we were just talking about Andrew Pickens scorching the earth of some of the Chickamauga properties. Do you think they were the only ones scorching the earth? So let me get this right. Me and my crew are going to leave our property in the middle of war, go purchase some slaves to work the land with the potential of somebody scorching our land, killing our crops, and taking our supplies to have those people not be able to work on the land. Okay. Let me know how that works. Prisoners of war, number 7. They were to be released and everybody sent back the way they're supposed to be. Number 8. Great Britain and the United States are each to be given perpetual access to the Mississippi River. Number 9. Territories captured by either side subsequent to the treaty will be returned without compensation. Number 10. Ratification of the treaty is to occur within 6 months from this signing. Pamela Hall says, okay, if possession is 9/10 of the law, how can they claim land when our ancestors were here before they knew of this Americas? You got to remember, Pamela, our ancestors signed the land over. Not only did they sign the land over, but we were marrying and having children with some of the most prominent Europeans, whether they be French, Dutch, or English. And they are now tied to the land through the matrilineal society. That's why Bones was saying that if you go and do some research, you'll find that the majority of the presidents and the cabinet have ties to the land. We allow that. We basically let their children end up being the chiefs that signed the treaties. So let's look at some of the consequences of this treaty that happened during the American Revolution that was fought all over the world. Pamela, our ancestors didn't sign it. The half-breed didn't sign it, but we had them go on our behalf and represent us. The matrilineal council, which were the women in a lot of tribes, they chose the chiefs. And the chiefs, in many cases, if not all, were their sons, their nephews, and their brothers' children, if not their sisters' children. And then as a tribe, we agreed to have them go on our behalf to represent us because they looked more like the Europeans. So Tego asks, what was it I said about the land swapping with Senegal? Well, what happened was, according to this treaty, any land that was taken was basically kept. Say, for instance, Spain and France were warring in Africa, and they end up getting some properties in Africa. It says France only net gains were the island of Tobago and Senegal. Well, if this is a revolutionary war, and Spain is supposed to be helping us fight Great Britain, what does Tobago and Senegal in Africa got to do with the lands in the United States?
Spanish colonies.
Not just the people, but the resources over there. You gotta realize a lot of our ancestors were actually over there helping to cultivate that land, because that land was considered a wasteland and a desert. You're looking at West Africa. That's how you end up having in the late 1800s Liberia and ancestors from Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina being sent over there.
Quick question: who had the first colonies in so-called Africa?
I don't know. Does anybody know that? Who had the first so-called colonies in West Africa?
Spanish that were only 9 miles away from them.
Yeah, I would guess so.
That if you look back at the map of so-called West Africa, back at this time, these places are known as Spanish colonies, Spanish Angola. And like we were saying yesterday, if you take the chance to go over there, a lot of them Africans still speak Spanish to this day.
So here's a question. Why would it be so important for them to have, or anybody battling for the land rights here in the United States, to have access to that land over there in Africa if you were not sending Indians over there to do some work and be able to transport those goods back here? Because we were going over there anyway. So whoever controlled the resources and the accesses to the ports would also control the commerce over there, wouldn't it? Just a thought. Remember, this is all business. Not just the slaves. You also need the resources. Because remember, there are crops grown in other places that we help cultivate. So it says, historians have often commented that the treaty was very generous to the United States in terms of greatly enlarged boundaries. Historians such as Alvord, Harlow, and Richardson have emphasized that British generosity was based on statesman-like vision of close economic ties between Britain and the United States. The concession of the vast Trans-Appalachian region was designed to facilitate the growth of the American population and create lucrative markets for British merchants without any military or administrative cost to Britain. The point was the United States would become a major trading partner. As the French Foreign Minister Vergennes later put it, the English buy peace rather than make it. Vermont was included with the boundaries because the state of New York insisted that Vermont was part of New York, although Vermont was then under the government that considered Vermont not to be part of the United States. Pamela says, so what were they eating before we got there over in Africa? I don't know. I have to do that research, Pamela. And so then it goes on to read, privileges that the Americans had received from Britain automatically when they had colonial status, including protection from pirates in the Mediterranean Sea. See the First Barbarian War and the Second Barbarian War were withdrawn. So they were no longer, United States was no longer protected by the British Navy. So in come the ESA. Individual states ignored federal recommendations under Article 5 to restore confiscated loyalist property. I told you they did that. And also ignored Article 6, e.g. by confiscating loyalist property and for unpaid debts. Some notably, Virginia also defied Article 5 and maintained laws against payment of debts to British creditors, meaning bankruptcy. They didn't pay them. The British often ignored the provision of Article 7 about removal of slaves. So everybody was just ignoring large parts of this article. It says the only article that stayed in force was Article 1 about the United States being a sovereign entity and its boundaries. the actual geography of North America turned out not to match the details used in the treaty. I wonder why not. The treaty specified a southern border for the United States, but the separate Anglo-Spanish agreement did not specify a northern boundary for Florida, and the Spanish government assumed that the boundary was the same as in 1763, by which they had first given their territory to Florida to Britain. While that West Florida controversy continued, Spain used its new control of Florida to block American access to the Mississippi. In defiance of Article 8, the treaty stated that the boundary of the United States extended from the most northwestern point of the Lake of the Woods, now partly in Minnesota, partly in Manitoba, and partly in Ontario, directly westward until it reached the Mississippi River. But in fact, the Mississippi does not extend that far northward. The line going west from the Lake of the Woods never intersects the river. So now it's all starting to make sense to me. So here's how it works. Our tribes were working with these Europeans. Deals were getting done and deals were getting made. Meanwhile, our ancestors was trying to interact and run their businesses. So now it's after the Revolutionary War, and what once, let's just say the Cherokee or the Catawba had access to Florida through the Mississippi. Now all of a sudden the Spaniards have cut them off because they helped the United States. So now the Catawba and the Cherokee, they're like, what's going on? And the United States will go, well, you know, them Spanish, you know how they do. So they're blocking. So you might need to go raid them and cause a war and conflict to get access back. So they were using our ancestors as pawns to navigate and control the trades. That's just the way I look at it. I could be wrong.
How many times we said wars are fought with proxies? The nation at war is never going to send its direct civilian population to war. When you do that, you lose your population. So you find a closer population to the area that you want, and that's your military to go do your dirty work. It still happens to this day. Nothing new up under the sun.
Peace, Patrick Gabriel. Hope all is well with you. Free says lots of American staples have been found throughout Africa for countries as well as all over the world, thanks to the indigenous seafarers. It says Great Britain violated the treaty stipulation that they should relinquish control of forts in United States territory with all convenient speed. British troops remained stationed in 6 forts in the Great Lakes region, plus 2 at the north end of Lake Champlain. The British also built an additional fort in present-day Ohio in 1794 during the Northwest Indian War. They found justification for these actions in the unstable and extremely tense situation that existed in the area following the war. In the failure of the United States government to fulfill commitments made to compensate loyalists for their losses, and in British need for time to liquidate various assets in the region, all posts were relinquished peacefully through diplomatic means as a result of the 1794 Jay Treaty. So, that in a nutshell was the Treaty of Paris that kept that lawsuit from happening. And what lawsuit am I talking about? So now I'm going back to the Cherokee American Wars. I'm going to put it back in the chat so you can follow, because we were just been reading over the past 40 minutes about the Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution, which was a war that took place in more places than just the 13 colonies. So this is a repeat for those that were here earlier, but it'll help tie everything in. So basically what it boiled down to, during the Georgia-Indian War of 1782, the Cherokee had invaded Georgia once again with a group of Muskogee. And this time they were met by South Carolina and Georgia troops under Andrew Pickens and Elijah Clark. So this is one of the few times that there was an actual skirmish on this land between opposing forces, opposed to them just ransacking each other's villages. So the Muskogee and Cherokee, excuse me, ended up retreating or moving in another direction, while Andrew Pickens and his militia started scorching the territories of the Cherokee and Muskogee, meaning going to their places where they were where the warriors were not there, and setting ablaze to everything, killing their crops, burning their supplies. So when the warriors came back, their families were probably dispersed and placed into slavery, and their land was torched. So there was nothing for them to come back to. So this was done at such an extent that the Cherokee decided to sue for peace. In the event of them trying to sue for peace, Dragon Canoe and 1,200 Cherokee traveled to St. Augustine, which was then the capital of East Florida, to meet with the delegation of Western tribes, Shawnee, Muskogee, Mohawk, Seneca, Lenape, Mingo, Tuscarora, and Choctaw, as a federation to oppose the Americans and their frontier colonists. And this was agreed upon by the British Superintendent Brown. After they got together, a few months later, a general council was put together, which consisted of those Indians and some other tribes. Right? But the plans for the Federation were cut short by the signing of the Treaty of Paris. So the Treaty of Paris basically short-circuited these tribes' plan to sue for peace after their land had been ransacked. So not only were their land ransacked, they probably lost more land because of the ceding of the land after the war. So hopefully that makes sense. James Flames, Doodle Vision, when you get a chance, come on in. So Bones, don't sell out. I mean, that was a lot to digest. What do y'all got to say about this?
I mean, it kind of deal with what we were reading already, and a lot of things we started putting together on a lot of the players that had to do with what went on.
It's one thing to speculate, to have an idea, but to actually see it written. And this is language that's taken from the treaty. Again, the source for this, or the source for the Treaty of Paris, is at the bottom of the Wikipedia page. Trabab said, did they lose the land or did they give it away? Both.
Yeah, it depends on what set you're talking about. Because remember, in the same tribe, you had some members that were selling tribal lands. In the same tribe, you understand, you had some members that didn't want to move and didn't go nowhere. And in these same tribes, you had members that wanted to pick up European lifestyles. I mean, it's not too hard to imagine what happened, because it still goes on today. Nothing is new. Everything is just a repeat of a repeat of a repeat. We're doing the same things our ancestors did. Nobody's coming in our communities, putting a gun to our head, making us do anything. Some of us are choosing to pick different sides. And that's an individual's right, but we have to look at what is the problem. People picking and doing what they want to do, basically.
And to piggyback on it, is basically people picking their sides to do what's best for them and their family, as opposed to do what's best for their tribe, or do what's best for the community, or do what's best as a whole. Selfish, because that was one of the first things that the Indian agent got us to change. We went from being a community where all of us lived in one big building and you had 20 families to now everybody having their own house. So the first thing they did was they made us no longer communal, which means we have no sense of taking care of our brothers and our sisters and the little ones who were the next generation. We went to taking care of self. I have my house, I have my land. I have my things. Go get your own. Go
We
ahead,
know
brother.
it. Come on, man. It runs through our culture no matter where we live. I got mine. Get that bag. I got me. I don't care what area you live. We got the slang that identifies back to it. We see it in the entertainment that's bombarded on us. You understand? We hear it in the music. You can see the individualism being pushed upon you. That we come from an environment to where a village was raising children, meaning that any adult that seen the child in harm or doing something wrong could address it, to living in a society now to where nobody better not say nothing to my child or else. Really? It's not hard to see how we got here. Are we willing to accept and take accountability for our actions?
Trab, you're absolutely right. Not only did they do a number on our people, we did a number on ourselves. We started introducing and inviting churches and religious clerics to our lands to indoctrinate our children. Our women who were upset at what, I got called like it is, at my tribe from bringing these European women over here and use them as slaves and having kids with them. They're like, okay, so two can play that game. You gonna start marrying these women and having kids with them? We gonna start marrying these Europeans and having kids with them. But we gonna do a little bit better. We gonna do a little bit different. Our children gonna have control. And since we are the ones that choose the chiefs, guess what? It's time for some payback. It's time for some get back. So you do what you do. We do what we do. And that's how you end up having a lot of these mulatto or mixed children who have French fathers and Indian mothers who tie into the land, basically negotiating our ancestors right out of land. So it was something that we brought on our own. And I dare say that the Catawba Sapani were the first violations of code. So for that, I apologize. Moving on. So where are we at now? So we just finished the St. Augustine Conference. And now we're going to go into the overhill politics. Okay. It says in the fall of 1783, the older pacifist leaders replaced Saphonica with another of their number, Corn Tassel, known to history as Old Tassel, and sent messages of peace along with complaints of settler encroachment to Virginia and North Carolina. Opposition from pacifist leaders, however, never stopped war parties from traversing the territories of any other town groups, largely because the average Cherokee supported their cause, nor did it stop small war parties of the overhill towns from raiding settlements in East Tennessee, mostly those in Holston. So as you can see, they're looking at these leaders as pacifists, and they're like, okay, you're not doing a good job, we're going to replace you with somebody. And Due Division says, these appointed Indian chiefs got beside themselves and started dressing like androgynous rock stars from Minneapolis. Yeah. So then we go from the overhill politics to the Treaty of Paris, which we basically already read, but I'm going to go over it because it's going to make more sense
I'm
to
like
you.
Oak Cliff Tiff real quick. I'm like, wait, hold up, what? Come again? Just the information to make you scratch your head. Like, hold on, man.
Again, that's why it's always good to have a perspective of an Indian who could tell you from our ancestors' point of view. Because J. Free said, player haters mode. Antonio Betty is the worst students ever, just dances in the middle of the class. He says, Student Vision says androgynous rock stars equal French and British. Patrick Gabriel asks Bones, he said, Bones, is European culture Moorish culture?
Look at it this way. We say French, Italian, British, Japanese, Chinese, Korean. But if you ever take the time to look out, everybody on that landmass is considered a European. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. Even when you look at the census, all them people referred to their landmass, they're considered Europeans. Ain't Europe the landmass? So wouldn't that be talking about the people from that landmass? These terms, France and all that, these are newer terms. Newer terms.
It's basically addressing the language that they speak, not who the people are in general, or where they're from.
They're called French because they speak French. They're called Spanish because they speak Spanish. But they all are Europeans. Just like over here, how you say our ancestors are all Aboriginal, but they got reclassified by what? The language they spoke. Same system, no different. They just didn't pull the wool over our eyes. In order to pull this off, they had to fool the whole world. Don't forget.
Big facts. Blinders on everybody.
So Trav was asking, George Corntassel was Cherokee? Well, that's a good question, Trav. Let's look up Corntassel. Let's see what interesting tidbits we can find on this man. Hello, Governor. I'm putting the link in the chat. What happened? What did I do?
No. Remind me of a character.
Oh. Old Tassel. Reyatai, sometimes corn tassel. Cherokee language. Utsi Dachta. He died in 1788. He was the first beloved man, the equivalent of a regional Cherokee chief, the Overhill Cherokee after 1783. He continuously tried to keep the Cherokee people of the Overhill region out of the Cherokee-American War. That's why they call him a pacifist, because he didn't want to fight. So I'm explaining to you what he was. Neutral. People of the Overhill region out of the Cherokee-American War is being fought at a time between the American frontiersmen and the Chickamauga warriors under Dragon Canoe. He was murdered under a flag of truce while defending his tribe from white settlers. So, because he was neutral, they let the white man kill him. See, when you don't pick a side gets picked for you. Doodle Vision says neutral equals cool with everybody. Go ahead, Bones.
If I can take a moment, let's analyze this term neutral. We all know about an automobile and the manual or stick shift, right?
I do.
If I put that vehicle in neutral, it can still move, can it?
Sorry, I was on mute. Most definitely.
Forward or backwards, whichever way it's given a push.
Mm-hmm.
Neutral does not mean safe. Let's remember that. Neutral does not mean safe. Basically, you can be maneuvered to any direction the pushing party wants you to go because you're neutral.
You go with the flow. The path of least resistance.
Bingo.
No, son, I said fence riders, mount up. Ladarian Wood says doing what we want instead of what we should. Then change the thinking from the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. Just a thought. I mean, you're right. We went from being a cultural people, a tribal people, to individualists. Free said because he was a neutral, his breath was made neutral. Unable to breathe in or out. Just neutral.
I don't know parts of that. I like breathing.
And another thing too, I think some people are under the misunderstanding that when if you're not neutral, you have to pick a side. At the end of the day, you either gonna do what's right or you're gonna do what's wrong. So it's not the matter of a side of a group of people or what some people refer to as, excuse my language, D-riding. At the end of the day, either you're gonna decide to do right or do wrong. And if you're riding with individuals that decide to do wrong, just because you're not doing wrong does not mean you're not guilty. If you ever been pulled over and the police found something in the car, if no one claims what's in that car, everybody gets taken in, don't they? I know in the state of Virginia that happens. Oh, since don't nobody know who this belonged to, then it basically belong to everybody. So I bet everybody going downtown. Unless somebody takes responsibility, right? And decides, hey, I was wrong. It was mine. It wasn't theirs.
Facts. Can't state it no better or realer than that.
So it has nothing to do with riding somebody's jock or kissing somebody's hind parts. It's about doing what's right. Right is right, wrong is wrong. And using the statement, well, I don't get into people's business. Well, you kind of do get into people's business. Because if you're riding with, think about this. You pull up to, if you stand on the street, right? And somebody pulls up to you and you know them. They say get in the car. Are you just going to get in or are you going to ask them where they're going? I don't know. Maybe just me. Somebody pulls up and they say get in, and I know them. I'm be like, hey, where you going? And then once I find out where they're going and I get in, then I'm going with them. That means I'm going along for the ride. That means I've decided to partake in whatever they decide to partake in. So even if I choose to be neutral and mind my business and say, hey, I'm just going to go for the ride because they seem cool, they end up robbing a bank. I stay in the car. I don't know what's happening. They get back in the car and they peel off. Security camera catches. I become accomplice to the crime. Even though I didn't know why or what they was doing because I was minding my business, I'm still guilty. Why? Because I was there. It doesn't matter if you stay out of somebody's business. The fact that you're rolling with them makes you guilty. Guilt by association.
Because you were there, it's part of your business now. You were present.
So I just wanted to put that out there for people who wants to change the narrative of what neutral means. You might want to make it your business to find out what the individuals are doing before they drag you into something that can not only harm you, but harm your family. And if your family has the same ideology as you, you could be harming more people than you think.
What's worse? Let's be honest. The person that's committing the wrong or the individual or individuals that watch the person do the wrong and walk the other way like nothing happened. Which one is worse?
The person that was minding their business at the same time seeing it and act like they didn't see it. Voyeurs. We are a nation of voyeurs now. We always want to watch. And I think it's detestable how people are quick to pull out their cell phones when something is going wrong. Like when women are getting beat and you pull out a cell phone and you post it. You don't stop her from getting beat. Or you see a crime. You don't do anything about it. I'm not saying stop in front of the gun. Make a phone call. Stop it. Wrong is wrong. I don't care what it is. If you got a problem with me, then I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bones.
The least you can do when you see wrong is use your voice to speak out against it. That's the least you can do. It costs you nothing to open up your mouth and speak.
And if anybody can show me an instance where they were neutral and a crime went down and they were in on it and they didn't know what was going on and they got off from it, I would love to hear about it. But I bet you that is the minority and not the majority. Majority of the time, if you know something or you are in the vicinity of somebody doing wrong, you are guilty by association. That's how people end up getting on the BIE list. Just a thought. back to this neutral guy that ended up getting his life taken because he was neutral, Corntassel. It says Old Tassel's brother were the warriors, Pumpkin Boy and Doublehead. His maternal nephew was John Watts, known as Young Tassel. The name Corntassel is also the Cherokee Indian nickname, allegedly, for ex-Cherokee Nation chief Chad Smith, who descends from Pig Smith. The Corntassel family still exists today, as well as Doublehead and Watts. Some Watts family lives in Wichita Falls, Texas area to this day. Karen Watts Gillespie and Jordan Calhoun are direct descendants of Old Tassel Watts. That's news to the Corntassel family members. Perhaps Young Tassel, not Principal Chief Old Tassel. I know, Golden Boone says Pumpkin Boy. Look, man, I didn't name him, I'm just reading it. So let's talk about the known history of Old Tassel. He became the first beloved man of the Ovill Cherokee in 1783 after the tribal areas removed his predecessor, the Raven Chota, also known as Savanuka. Being an advocate of peace, Old Tassel strove with only some success to keep the people of the Overhill towns out of the Cherokee-American Wars being fought at the time between the white settlers and the Chickamauga in what is now the eastern Tennessee and southeastern Kentucky region. Rayetahi signed the 1777 Treaty of Long Island, the Treaty of Hopewell, before his death in June 1788. Old Tassel was given an American flag sold by Betsy Ross, which flew over his door 24/7 until his cabin was burned to the ground at the time of his murder. I'm sorry. It says Old Tassel and another pacifist chief, Abraham of Chiloe, were murdered while under the flag of truce during an entreaty to the state of Franklin in June 1788. Wrongfully blamed for the murder of the Kirk family, then being lured to Abraham's cab by the flag of truce, the Bloody Seven were tied to chains, and John Kirk was allowed by the U.S. government to tomahawk each man in the forehead. Old Tassel was boisterous in his death, stood up with a tomahawk in his forehead, pulled out and advised, "Sir, you have misjudged me. You must strike again," and bowed his head in the wrongful revenge. He was known as a great orator. The act was considered an atrocity by the Cherokee and briefly brought the Cherokee to support the hostile actions of the warriors following Dragon Canoe. Now, I'm not advocating anything wrong should happen to people that are neutral, so please don't misunderstand that. I'm just saying that sometimes being neutral, you can find yourself in a bad place because you didn't make a decision. The decision is made for you. That's all I'm saying.
That's basically all that happens when you claim neutral. You forfeit your right to have a voice or a choice.
So hopefully that answers your question, Trabab. Really? I'm not even going to read that, no sellout.
Don't. Please don't.
So somebody been watching late night lately? Where them Letterman jackets at?
Anyway. So basically, everything led to the culmination of the Treaty of Paris, signed between Great Britain and the United States on September 3rd, 1783. The Treaty of Paris is a treaty formally ended the American Revolution. The U.S. had already unilaterally declared hostilities over the previous April. Brown had already received orders from London in June to cease and desist. Following the treaty, Dragon Canoe turned to the Spanish, who still claimed all the territory south of the Cumberland and were now working against the Americans for support, trading primarily through Pensacola and Mobile. Dragon Canoe also maintained relationships with the British governor at Detroit, Alexander McKee, through regular diplomatic missions there under his brothers Little Owl and the Badger. With the end of the Revolutionary War, new settlers began flooding in the over mountain settlers. Stop.
Time.
So, this is important, and this is something that needs to be read again. With the end of the Revolutionary War, new settlers begin flooding into the overmountain settlements. So what does that imply?
After the war, the record shows that they started bringing women and children by the boatloads.
So does that mean people are coming over during the war?
Sound like it.
No. What I'm trying to say is, because the question that we always ask is, how do you go get slaves? How do you do all these things when there's a war going on? If there's wars going on and you're not bringing any new settlers and you're not bringing any new settlements, that means you're not bringing any new people, period, unless those are people that you're capturing in war. Because it's too dangerous, right? And think about it. If you have people who have not paid you yet, right, come to an area that's under war and they die, how do you recoup your money? So there is no way that you're going to be putting people in an area where there's war until it's settled, until after the treaties are signed. Right? Or am I missing something?
No, sound about right to me. Basically, if you look at it, a lot of the war started from encroachment, bringing people over, putting them on Indian lands. People coming back 10, 20 years later, realizing there's a whole town built on their land.
So what it sounds like to me is you have the encroachment, you have the wars, you have the treaties. Then you have the encroachment, then you have the wars, and you have the treaty. Then you have the encroachment, then you have the wars, and you have the treaties. Does that sound all right?
Yep.
So you do not bring people over during the war. You bring them over after the war and after the treaties been signed because no one's fighting. But the fighting gets caused because you're bringing more people over.
Look at this. We all know this term or slogan, however you want to identify it. Give them an inch, they take a mile. Again, give them an inch, they take a mile.
Exactly. So, yeah, at the end of the day, it says, and another thing that I want people to understand too, it says the new settlers began flooding into the overmountain settlements. It does not say new settlers and slaves or new settlers with their slaves. It said new settlers.
Yep.
I could be wrong.
I got a question since you mentioned that. And we know from records that the people that were being coming over here, they had to pay the boat captains. And a lot of them went into indentured servitude to pay back the fee for being bought here. So if you was working to pay back boat captains, where did you get the money to purchase slaves from? I'll wait.
Maybe put on your credit. I don't know.
We talking about people who coming over here that had no currency of this land. How was you buying anything when you was coming over here working off debt to get finances?
Okay.
They had the rush card back then, I guess.
Charge it.
Oh, those are some great questions. I just wanted to point that out, that they did not bring floods of people over till there was an area that was settled and there was a treaty. Because you're not going to put people that owe you money in harm's way.
Unless you don't want to make your money back. And if that's the case, why do business?
So where was I?
Oh, Cliff said, no, that was that Discover card.
You come over here to discover that day at war, you might die.
Like, where'd that boat go, yo?
Okay. He said, sounds like a nightmare scenario. Their doctored history. Has holes big enough to drive a semi-truck through. Yeah, it is.
Old story done sunk.
So it says, with the end of the Revolutionary War, new settlers began flooding into Overtown settlements. The reaction from the Cherokee was predictable. Only it did not come from the towns on the lower Little Tennessee. Instead, warriors from middle towns east of the mountains on the upper Little Tennessee began retaliation against the settlers on the west side, targeting the newer owners of the Pigeon and the French Broad Rivers. Late 1783, Major Peter Fine raised a small militia and crossed the mountains to the east side and burned down the town of Cowie. So, this makes me think of something. All right.
Pamela Hall. Glad you caught the cab, and we'll be here when you're ready to come back.
Yeah, we'll be wrapping up shortly. So, here's the thing. Not only were the Indians being used as pawns, the real pawns were the people that came over here. Think about it.
Yeah.
You come over
you
here.
use them, you use your citizens to encroach on the land, giving them the right to launch military campaigns.
And that's how they got the land.
Yep. Using their own people in the line of fire that starts the spark off wars with Indians. Then you bring in the cavalry.
And other Indians. That's all this was.
So like I said before, you're not going to risk yourself if you know they out there throwing tomahawks and arrows. Come on, man. Show me where does the so-called high privilege class fight on the front lines in wars.
They never do.
Ain't generals sitting back someplace in D.C. and soldiers way across the water someplace fighting? And the majority of them soldiers, not even U.S. citizens. They soldiers that were converted from the population of that land. There's nothing new.
So can you imagine being an immigrant, coming over here thinking you're going on get a piece of land for free? You get some land, right? And then all of a sudden, you being attacked because there's somebody telling you own their land. And in any cases, people in your family are being killed. You don't know what's going on. So then what do? You go to the mayor. You go to the governor. Hey, I thought you said this land was mine. Why are there people attacking me? Oh, we'll take care of it. Another war.
Yep.
That's how they got the land from us.
Let's put it in our day and time. We're living in our communities. Next thing you see encroachment of people that don't look like you in your communities. The people in the community, they react in a particular way. Next thing you know, it ramps up. Police drive-throughs, curfews, what you can and can't do in these neighborhoods. You see it still happening. Nothing is new. Running the same old program. We should all know this by now.
As Free says, you mean gentry? People of good social position, specifically in the UK. The class of people next below the nobility in position and birth. People of a specific class or group. New Orleans family of Creole gentry. Which is where the term regentrification comes from. Maybe.
In fact, Carlene, it's going down in Jamaica right now. Over there, I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, last time, they were building the expressway over there, charging you $300 just to use the highway in Jamaica. All around the world, it's the same song, y'all. I'm gonna say it again. All around the world, the same song. Different artists singing it, but it's the same song.
So you got the encroachers coming in. While the encroachers are coming in, they're working with the surveyors who work for the state to redraw the boundaries. Meanwhile, the Indians are going back to the states who they have treaties with and say, hey, why are y'all people encroaching on my land? Well, they're not supposed to be encroaching on your land. We'll go ahead and take care of that. But meanwhile, you don't attack these good people. Because if you attack these good people, then we're going to have to fight. Then what happens? There's a fight. There's a war. Then what? Land gets seceded. And then there are redrawn lines. And then it starts all over again. Like clockwork.
You see it in districting and zoning now. How small they done made the areas that we were used to living in. Look over the last 20, 30 years how the so-called urban hood got smaller and smaller and smaller. Our neighborhoods are the ones with the most foreclosed houses and abandoned buildings. That's by design. So now they can come in the neighborhood, oh, this property is delinquent. It's just sitting here. It's an eyesore. It's dropping down the property value. So what you think happens next?
New politician gets voted in because the old politician allowed the city to go into disarray. The new politician comes in and vows to make a change. We're going to change. We're going to upgrade this city. We're going to do something for the citizens of this county, of this district. We're going to get rid of this eyesore. So then they give contracts to developers. The developers end up creating this spectacular model, which the people who currently live there cannot afford. Eminent domain is declared. Those people get moved where? South or west or east. Sometimes north, depending on where you're at.
But mainly south and west.
And then they build these buildings, and then they bring in another class of people.
Don't it sound like the taxes that they put on Indians for their land? Isn't that about the same thing when a company comes in, buys up property in your neighborhood, then raise the price to live there to the point to where you can't afford to stay? Isn't that the equivalent of charging Indians taxes on their own land? Then when they don't pay, you take it and do what you want to do with it? Nothing's new up under the sun.
And if you ever notice, the stores in those areas that were taking advantage of the HUD 3 money, they end up doing what? Selling the businesses to a major block or a major chain. And then they end up moving right where you move. Reinvesting it, getting that thing on HUD 3 money again. And the process happens over and over and over and over again. How many times are we going to put up with that? Just saying. Reed says, right, we don't use the resources at our disposal. Then our neighborhoods get run down. If we're not filling out the census, monies aren't allocated towards our communities. Exactly. James says they follow the Indians to get paid. We get upset because there are people in our communities that don't look like us taking, I'm using air quotes, taking our money. That's because we don't take advantage of those systems who allow us to take advantage of our own communities. Because if you were to take advantage of it, not only could you upgrade your lifestyle, but you could upgrade your community. Then there would be no need for regentrification. Why? Because you're minding your own business. Regentrification only happens when a community does not mind or tend to its own business. Nothing changes if nothing changes.
And a lot of people would be like, what's the remedy or the solution for it? Start taking advantage of the same programs and mechanisms that others are using to confine us in particular areas of our neighborhood. There's no super special racial qualification to use these same resources. We just have to apply. We just have to be willing to make the sacrifices. If all of us can't, then in our communities, let's start forming groups to where we can have 2 or 3 representatives that can go to these meetings. Like TMA said before, and a lot of us know by experience of dealing with our local government, that a lot of these meetings take place 11 a.m., 12 p.m. during the day, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock on the middle of a Wednesday, to where most people got to be out working. So we know it's not going to change. So we got to be smart on how we access this. As an individual, we will never win. But as a group, we are unstoppable. Again, as an individual, we will never win. But as a group, we are unstoppable.
Doodle Vision says you complain about the corner store, but then you run up there and get a 40-ounce in a lottery ticket.
Facts. And it even touched back on what LJ Free was saying earlier. This is why the census is important. A lot of people will tell you don't participate and don't do it. But if you understand what the census is designed for, it's designed for the allocation of resources.
Yeah, bro. This has been deep. Man.
Now look at it this way. An urban area to where let's just say 30% of this population don't partake in the census. So when it's time for this neighborhood to get the needed resources it's needed, it's showing on record, on paper, on documented file that the population done dropped by what, 10, 20%. Therefore telling that local government that this community don't need as many resources because the population of the community died down. It is very critical that we start participating in these systems that are designed to benefit us. We can't cry about our conditions at the same time not participating in the game to improve our conditions.
Grand Rising, Jay Susquehanna. Hope all is well with you, bro.
But that's what we do, Macadon One. These same programs and resources we can use to have the stores in our own community. So a lot of people be like, what the problem is? Let's play it out in this scenario. A foreigner has a local corner store in your neighborhood. But now this foreigner does not live in your neighborhood. But this neighborhood every day, 365, take their finances and spend in this corner store. Now the finances that this corner store then generated from this community, this owner goes back to his community and spend them funds, improving his community. So all we're saying is with these same resources, imagine what happens when we tap in and we keep these finances in our community for 12, 13 cycles before we allow any finances to leave. Then we're in the same situation. It's proven that it's worked. Whole cities and whole areas are being built off these programs where the masses thinks it's a person with finances or wealth paying for it out of his pocket. Let me let the relatives know something. Rich and wealthy people build things, but they never spend their own money out their pocket. If you're doing business and you spending it out of your pocket, that's a plan for failure. They tap into resources to get it done and get kickbacks for building in our communities. But don't take our word for it. It's public info.
Yep. And are we saying that this is the only way to get out of the situation? No, we are not. We're not even intimating that. What we are saying is it's a way that we know for a fact that works. It's not something that we have to test. It's not something we have to try to get right. We already know it works. Many of us have already been a part of the services and started using them to benefit not only our communities, but other communities. Many people have been part of using these services for over 30 years and has helped their community get millions of dollars. So this is not a test. This is not a theory. This is not something we think will work. This is something that we know works. Now, again, we're not saying this is the only system. We're not saying this is the only means, nor are we saying this is the only mechanism. We're saying this is a proven fact that works. That's all we're saying. Is it the only mechanism? Not by a long shot, but it's one that works. So if you want to go try something that you don't know whether it works or not, be my guest. I hope it works. I really hope it works. But I don't have time to be waiting to see whether it's something that you haven't tried before works or not. I don't have time to waste to see if what you tried is going to get people locked up because it hasn't been proven. I don't have that kind of time. I got 7 generations I got to take care of. So if you know of another system, if you know of another plan that works, do that. But we know this works. There's proof positive. So hopefully that helps.
Grand Rising, Jafrida Gordon. Much respect and love to all my Gordon relatives this rising. Glad you caught that cab. I should be down in Florida, hopefully in another 3 weeks. Try to hook up with all the relatives when I get down. Yeah, and that's all we're saying. These same mechanisms is why there's a gas station in your neighborhood. It's why there's football stadiums built in the hood. It's why Walmart is in always close proximity to our neighborhoods. We're not telling you something that we're guessing on. That's an if. And like we said before, here at Autonomous Assembly, we are using these resources to help communities. That's how we know they work. We put out the links to the HUD.gov for people to read up on it to see how long these mechanisms have been in place. So you can have a better idea how they're being used and who's using them. We did the 501c series to show the relatives that a lot of these companies that you think are for profit, they're not. Your banks, your credit unions, a lot of your hospitals, the US military, these are all nonprofits that are accessing these funds. A lot of these funds are dictated by the population of your area. That's all it takes to qualify in some of them.
Welcome, brother James. Doodle Vision. Please add your expertise to what we're talking about, or if we're saying something wrong, please correct us.
Guess he's getting this sound right.
I didn't mean to prolong the show. I just have a few. Well, one question. As I see, pardon me, I was excited. You know, yesterday was my day, so celebrating. As we see, I see this more often than not, and this is not direct shot at you, Jay Susquehanna Radio, because you know you're my man, 50 grand. But I have a question for those that come into the chats or come into the back chats, and someone comes up with a solution, and then they say, no, not true. That's not true. And when we ask, I know I personally ask, well, give me another solution, and then there's silence. We don't hear anything. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, in order to rebuild your community, you're not gonna be able to do it selling t-shirts. You can forget that. You're not going to be able to do it selling socks. You're not going to be able to do it selling unks and dream catchers. You're not going to be able to do it sitting out on the corner, on the block, selling mixtapes. I go back again to Nipsey Hussle. He figured that out. And he sold a lot of mixtapes. It takes a whole lot more than you selling a couple of albums and you thinking that you're gonna rebuild your neighborhood. Not happening. Again, Nipsey Hussle took advantage of that, and your boy Master P. Because remember he had the bootleg college. Everybody remember ICDC college? Y'all remember that?
Yes, I do. He started it off government grants.
So
And Jay, if
don't
you
let
don't
the
mind me
spoon stay
asking,
full. Don't let people think that you're gonna come up, that I'm gonna be the next MC, the greatest rapper of all time, and I'm not using any of that. You need to go down to Houston and you better ask them about Jay-Z and Beyonce, what they're doing down in Houston. They are taking advantage of this CDBG money to rebuild Houston and rebuild it again, because you know Houston's been flooded a couple of times here in the last 5 years. So if y'all think that selling RBG socks and all the rest of this is gonna get you on the come up, or selling, you know, trinkets is gonna get you on the come up to rebuild. And I'm not talking about you buying a little shack of a building and you doing whatever. I'm talking about rebuilding your community. And again, as it was said before, there's the difference between somebody that's rich and someone that's wealthy. Someone that's rich spends their own money, flashing, got chinchillas, gold grill, and everything else, and Rolexes. A wealthy person does not use their money. They invest a little bit of their money, and guess what? They use someone else's money. You better go and ask Bill Gates with his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You think he's not making money off of that? Come on, son. I yield the mic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to prolong the show, but I had to come
no
on.
problem, James. If anything, I just wanted to ask you a question. Mainly, you know about a lot of these mechanisms and programs, because I'm gonna keep saying it. Because you yourself have a well documented history of accessing these programs for 20 plus years. Am I correct when I state that?
Yes, sir. And tried to retire and couldn't. Still can't. I was trying to be left alone. I was like, I'm done, but I can't, because the calling of the people are still there. So I guess, you know, it's something, you know, I guess I'm the Jay-Z of that community, because, you know, he tried to retire and then he made a comeback. I yield the mic.
When I come back like Jordan, winning the 4-5.
And I'll make it and like this for everyone who's listening, because I know how our people are. We've been given so many promises and stories that sound good that a lot of us become skeptical and don't believe things that are being told, and mainly when the people look like us. So I ask of all our relatives, take the time out and look up HUD. Take the time out to look up PIH, Public Indian Housing. Read the info for yourself. That's why we drop these links. Then after you dig through it and comb through it, then come back and you will see exactly what we're talking about. You will see exactly what the plan is and the direction that we're trying to take this. As been stated before, the conditions of our childhood and our parents' childhood never had to be. The question is now, we are aware of the resources. We know how to access the resources. So now, how many of us are willing to stand up to do it, to fix our communities? I mean, to show another, our young sister, Danielle Jeffries, that a lot of us are very proud of at a young age. Using a lot of these mechanisms to make sure that she graduated debt-free. And not only did she graduate debt-free, turned around and created a mechanism to make sure her peers in the next generation can do the same. So there are programs that are successful and running off of these mechanisms. We just got to take the time out to start playing ball. That's it.
Well, the beautiful thing about us being who we are, there are many mechanisms that's going to allow us to get to this finish line, if you will. And that's the reason why I want to emphasize that at the Thompson's Assembly, we are by no stretch of the imagination claiming, intimating, or insisting that this is the only way to do it. I repeat, we are not claiming, intimating, or insisting that this is the only way to do it. This is a way that we know that works. It works beyond a shadow of a doubt. There are millions of examples, not hundreds, not thousands, but millions. There are hundreds and thousands of it working in your neighborhood. So the goal is to shorten the learning curve and to help as many people as possible. Again, this is not the only way. And I can't wait for others to do the work that they're doing. There's a lot of people doing the work in the background. I don't doubt that. I just can't wait for the day for them to show so we can see all these mechanisms come together and do something great. And I know it's going to happen. So please don't think that we are saying that this is the only mechanism, because we know it's not. This is the mechanism that we know as a unit, as a group, that works because we've experienced it, we've witnessed it, we've been a part of it, and we're now doing it. So I just wanted to put that out there so no one can create a false narrative that we try to tell you what to do and that our way is the only way and we're the best thing since sliced bread. None of that. We're learning just like you learning, and this is one thing we know for a fact. This works. It can't be disproven because it's what this country is ran off of. And they're using the foundations that our ancestors created. And if you believe that our ancestors gave the Constitution to the United States government and that they're using our formula, then it might be something worth looking into. Not necessarily doing, but just looking into. Because what do you call a CEO? What do you call the president of the United States that's over the military or the government?
Chief.
He's a CEO, Chief Executive Officer.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been wrong a lot. Before they got to this land, the Europeans were not calling their leaders chiefs. So the question is, who they get it from and why they still using it?
That's a good question.
And for those who doubt that nonprofits, and we keep stating this, are quick to tell you is ran by the government, tell yourself that when the NFL start back and you sitting in front of that television watching the football every Sunday, which is a nonprofit bringing in, what was that, 13 billion a year it was?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nonprofit. This meaning, all that means is that organization, the NFL as an organization, can't take 13 billion into the next fiscal year. They got to burst and send it out and improvements, spending and improvement salaries. You wonder why you see these companies so-called doing bad, but giving these executives $250,000 raises, because they got to get rid of the money. Study the mechanisms, relatives. Around here feeling sorry for banks, but what did you learn? Banks are backed by credit unions, and credit unions are what? Non-profits. Insurance companies, non-profits.
You can have your own electric company. That's a non-profit.
Water plants, that's non-profit. Agriculture, non-profit. Everything you need to be self-sufficient. But you got to be willing to share the individual to access it. See, that's the catch. It's this individuality that doesn't allow us to plug into a lot of these programs, because we want to go as an individual. Oh, me and mine straight. I don't know about everybody else, but me and mine got it. We got to unprogram that and get back on code. Get back to where the conditions of our melanated American Indian brothers and sisters matter. If I'm doing good, but I can walk past my neighbor and he not, I should feel bad too.
So, again, shout out to all those that are out in the community, not just on this platform, but other platforms that are doing things for your community and helping your community, that are doing the real work. Shout out to you. I look forward to the fruits of your labor. I look forward to seeing it. I look forward to you being able to do community spotlights on your channels where you're helping your communities. Because nothing that we do is our, I guess for lack of a better term, is our invention. You know, we can all get on these platforms and read things, regurgitate information, and build. That's a great thing. The the more important thing is what do we do after we get off these platforms? What are we doing in our communities? Who are we talking to? Who are we helping? That's what we mean when we say a conscious assembly where the real work gets done. Because after you get off the platform, you gotta go do some real work. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully this information was beneficial today and will continue to be beneficial for you. Hopefully those that are serious about setting up nonprofits and find out about HUD 3s to benefit themselves and their community, they will continue to reach out to not only us, but to their HUD representatives in their local principalities. Hopefully you continue to do the research. So before we head on out, so we can go do some real work, Doodle Vision, do you have anything that you would like to add or say before we head out?
I would say appreciate you all as always, and those in the chat. And I want to put it out there and make sure that it's caught on audio. That I appreciate you, Jace at Susquehanna Radio, for clarifying that. Like I said, that wasn't even necessarily, it wasn't toward you. It was toward others that I hear all the time, and I see it all the time. That they say, no, that don't work. And those guys are they agents or they weirdos, and you hear that all the time. However, their means of coming up is having a PayPal account or a Patreon account. You are not going to come up doing that. Believe me. Spike Lee found that out the hard way. You all remember he was trying to raise money using Kickstarter because he wanted to be independent and do his own movies and not have anything financed. How'd that work out for him? Now he's right back in the mainstream making quality movies because that movie he made with Kickstarter was bootleg. Anybody want to tell me the name of that movie? You probably can. See, that's what I'm talking about. So again, everyone, I don't care whatever your capability is or level of expertise is, everyone has something value to bring to the table, and that is sweat equity. When you don't have a dime, when you don't have two nickels to rub together, you have sweat equity. Sweat equity, it equates to value. So you have something to bring to the table. Again, if you think that all of these so-called Europeans, I mean those that are coming over, and I mean those that are North Africans, I mean those that are West Africans too, that call you brother, they coming over here and they say, I put myself up by my bootstraps. Wait a minute, you didn't have a dime, that's why you came over here. And you fly your flag proudly outside of your apartment or your house. But you come over here to take advantage of these programs. Remember, they come over here with nothing. Remember, all the people coming over from Cambodia and Vietnam, they had nothing. How were they able to come up and then get restaurants and stores in our neighborhoods when you don't have anything? Y'all better think about it. How do you think all those from Pakistan and all the rest of them that everybody gets upset about, oh, they got all the gas stations. How do you think they got the gas station? They didn't come over here with anything. So we need to be smarter and don't let people talk you out of what is rightfully yours. You can't work with everybody. You can't do it. It's impossible. So everybody getting along, it's not happening. Because I'm going to put it to the test. Does everybody in this chat still talk to their immediate relatives? And do you talk about going into business deals with your immediate relatives? Some of you all you ain't talked to your cousins in 20 years because they owe you $5. So let's tell the truth. So everybody in this community, so-called community, is not going. And I'm saying if they go their separate path and it works for them, if PayPal accounts and Patreon accounts, if that works for you, then you go right ahead and knock yourself out. But I've seen way too many times it does not work. It does not work. even your politicians, and I'll say this, I'm gonna yield the mic, even your politicians use other people's money. Go look and see how much the one that's in the White House, how much money he's raised for his campaign going into 2020. Go and look at each Democratic and independent candidate, how much money they raised for 2020. They're not using their money, they're using other people's money. I yield this cotton picking mic. Thank y'all again.
And to add on to what Brother James just said, if most can remember when we did the 501c series, nonprofits are allowed to spend 49.9% of their income towards politics or political candidates or the influence of getting someone elected, with no cap on how much finances they can take in. So as a nonprofit, if you took in $300 million, guess what? You can spend 49.9% of that towards any political campaign. We talking about change? We're looking at it. And again, to touch on what they were saying about the YouTube, just because you can do something, don't always mean you should. Yes, we can get on these forums and partake like everybody else, do the same thing everybody else does, but it doesn't mean we should. Why don't we use these mechanisms? All of us use these mechanisms to make sure we inform as many of our people as we can. Our job is just to inform, give them the choice, let them know there's a better way, show them that we can, one by one, fix the conditions of our environment. And on that, any last closing remarks?
No, Sal, you got anything?
Links in the chat. Everybody have a great grand day.
All I got to say is, we're the Conscious Assembly. Our goal is to help people find their tribes, do their genealogy, tie into their tribes, and if they so choose, help themselves, their community, and their tribes be self-sufficient. We're not here to tell you what you should be doing. We're not here to tell you what you should not be doing. We're not here to tell you who you are. We're definitely not here to tell you who you are not. But what we will tell you is this. If you are hanging around scammers, we can't rock with you. No disrespect to you. But that's not how we roll. Because if you go back and look at our motto and our mission, every business decision we make is based off of who we associate ourselves with. And we cannot be talking about we're for the community if we're associating with people who steal from the community. I'm sorry, that's just not the way it works. I don't know how your community works, but you couldn't live in my community, that's for sure. So, again, we're here to help those that want the help, but we got a clean house. If you like your house messy, and you got mud on your shoes, don't get mad at me because I don't let you come in my house tracking mud. With that being said, much love and respect to everybody that's doing the real work. And I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. I relinquish the mic.
So on that note, like we said, we rising. It's always enjoyable when we kick it with the relatives. No place we'd rather be in the rising. It's always a good time, always informative. Until the next rising show, be blessed and peace.
Peace, y'all.